On this Independence Day, we pause and reflect on generations that have come before us. We also think of America's founders who established a nation conceived in liberty. A close study of the founders reveals they were patriots laboring not just for themselves, but for future generations. That's a break with what we see today. Their defiance to the British Crown established a nation where their children and their children's children could be raised striving for our highest ideals rooted in biblical transcendent truth. Of course, they followed in the path of the Pilgrims that just 150 years earlier risked everything they had to establish a better culture for their children and to pave the way for the advancement of the gospel. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Dr. John Wilsey. He's the Associate Professor of Church History and Philosophy at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, as well as the author of American Exceptionalism and Civil Religion, Reassessing the History of an Idea. Professor Wilsey, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you on this holiday.
Great to be with you. Happy 4th of July.
So let me jump right into this. Let me ask you the assertion that I made at the top of this program. Faith plus family is what's given us freedom, and I think that's a part of the special sauce, if you will, of what has given us American exceptionalism.
Oh, I agree, and I think that that's part of the American heritage, going all the way back to the founding. The Federalists conceived of the social contract, what Locke called a social contract, in terms of not just the living, not just the people that were alive when they were alive, but a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born. And that was a quote from Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France, which he wrote in 1790. But John Adams, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, the founding generation, particularly the Federalists, believed in that concept of society, that society should not be thought of as just the living. That was too immediate. They thought of society as comprising the inheritance that they received from their forebears who were gone, to be enjoyed in the present, and also to be handed down as an inheritance to their children and to their children's children.
So they kind of saw themselves as a bridge between generations.
Absolutely.
It didn't stop with them. They were carrying on the great grand traditions and ideas that preceded them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a historian that I'm very fond of by the name of Daniel Boorstin. He was a historian in the 50s and 60s. He was the Librarian of Congress for many years, I think till 1987. He talked about America as being the product of givenness. And givenness he defined as every society, every generation in American society has received an inheritance from their forebears. And that givenness is something to be enjoyed and then handed down and given as a gift, as a bequeath to future generations. That's something that's always been in the American mind and the American culture.
You know, I think in terms of the policies that we work on in our nation's capital and in state capitals across the country, because I think it's a snapshot of what we prioritize as a nation. And, you know, one of the things, it's not so much to the forefront right now, but it has been in the last decade, and that's embryonic stem cell research. And I think that so encapsulates this twisted nature of the human mind and where we've come as a culture, where no longer are we looking to pave the way for our posterity. We're actually using our posterity, even in the womb, to benefit ourselves. We're robbing them of their lives to try and enhance our own.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's sort of a leftist kind of commitment, that you really only want to focus on the living, on the present generation, and not worry about the consequences for those generations that are yet to be born. This is sort of central to Keynesian economic theory, originating in the early 20th century, and it's still sort of marking our culture today. Don't worry about future generations. Let's just worry about ourselves.
So to recapture where America's greatness, if you will, This is going to require a shift of our thinking. I think it's rooted, obviously, in our vertical relationship with God, understanding the transcendent nature of His truth. But we need to begin focusing on our children, equipping them with that same truth, with this eternal perspective, and stop allowing the left to indoctrinate our children with what's been happening. And that's exactly what's been happening in our culture.
Yeah. And I think, I'm a historian, so this is not going to surprise you that I would say this, but American history should be a resource for us as we pursue that very worthy goal. I'm going to read you two quotes from two very important Americans. One was Samuel Johnson, who was the president of King's College, later Columbia University in the colonial period. He said that the aim of education was to lead students from the study of nature to the knowledge of themselves and of the God of nature and their duty to Him, themselves, and one another, and everything that can contribute to their true happiness, both here and the hereafter. And then Benjamin Franklin said that education was primarily about service. He said, to serve mankind, one's country, friends, and family, and to supply the succeeding age with men qualified to serve the public with honor to themselves and to their country. History serves us as a resource in our working for the good of society for today.
So, Dr. Wilsey, to make this very practical on this July 4th holiday, what should parents and grandparents, what are a couple of practical steps they need to take, not only benefit them and their families, but literally save freedom in this country?
Be involved in your children's education. That is the most important thing that parents can be doing with regard to that question now. Whether your children are, in public schools, or they're in private schools, or if you homeschool your children, obviously you're going to be involved in their education if you're homeschooling. But no matter what context your children are in their educational process, be involved in what they're learning. Know what the curriculum is that they are engaged in. Look at the textbooks, read those textbooks, and see what your children are being inculcated with. Get to know your children's teachers. Understand what their worldviews are. And also be willing and open to find another avenue for your children's education. Might be to pull them out of the school that they're in. It might cost you some things. It might mean some sacrifices on your part. But to sacrifice for your children is the most worthy sacrifice you can make.
And it's deeply rooted in the history of this country. That is what our founders did. They were looking to future generations and sacrificing on their behalf. Dr. Wilsey, great to see you. Happy 4th of July, and thank you for taking time to join us today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.